Hello, everyone. This is Stephen McNallen with another episode of Gods, Folk, and Destiny. Whose gods? Our gods and goddesses, the holy powers of the north, led by Odin and by Frigga. Whose folk? Our folk, born of ancient Hyperborea, now spanning the globe with eyes on the stars. Whose destiny? Our destiny, which we will win by hard work and mighty deeds, honor, sovereignty, well-being, and the existence of our people forever. So shall it be. Tonight, I go to plan B. Bryan Wilton is on the road. He's in a place where he's got really bad internet connection, and we did everything we could for the past 15 minutes, whatever it's been, trying to get him up so that you could get what you asked for and what you need tonight. So I can't really tell you a lot about some of the things we were going to talk on, but all is not lost. Before we drive on, though, support this work by the usual 4 things. Number 1, subscribe. 2, like. 3, comment. 4, share this with others. I am here to change the world before I die, and I invite you to join me in that undertaking. Changing the world, that is, not dying. Okay, so with that out of the way, we had such a good lineup. Bryan was going to talk about some of his thoughts on his recent work that he's got going on. He's working on about 3 different books that are coming to fruition now. They're, as usual, anything to do with Alsatru is wide open with Bryan. When I first met Bryan, I got to say, and I don't mean this as an insult, but he had this sort of air of almost a country preacher. He has that way, that country way, that Oklahoma way, and as a Texan, I can appreciate that. He has that way of just talking to people to the heart. He should have been a preacher. He would be on television now, and people would be sending him big money, and he'd be driving a Rolls Royce or something. He'd have one of those mega churches or something like that. But, that, thank goodness, is not what happened. We're very glad to have him on our side rather than on the other side. And I'm going to kind of try to summarize just a few things that he mentioned to me in the notes. We talk back and forth to each other before these programs, and I try to get an idea from my guest, what is it that you want to talk about? What points do you want to get across? What areas do you want to emphasize? And with Bryan, it's almost always his new material, because he is the most prolific writer I know. I was talking with Edred Thorson the other day, and he said that he tries to write 750 words, I believe it was, a day. And that's a lot. But I think that Bryan must even break that, because I said to him, Bryan, how many books have you written now? And he couldn't think of an actual number. He said, I don't know, about 40. So he cranks them out. He's a man who takes the material that we work with, things like the Eddas and the other source material, and he processes it, and he turns it into things for people's life, people's real life, what issues people have, people's goals, people's fears, people's aspirations, all those things that make up our lives. And I think that's why Bryan is so popular with a lot of people. And I just wish we could have had him with us tonight, but it wasn't going to work. Some of the topics, we were going to talk about beauty in our religion, beauty in the lore. Every time a man brushes up against beauty, he finds inspiration. That's a direct quote in his notes to me. He talks about imagery offered by Bragi in the Prosetta, every bit as influential as the composition of Mozart or Bach, or the landscapes of Bierstadt or Ansel Adams. So he's thought a lot about this, as you can tell. He says, it's the kind of thing which might inspire someone to say, I follow this faith because it provides my life with positive purpose, guidance, and direction, instead of, I follow this faith because of what some scholar says. So it's basically, it's from the heart. which I think is only right. I mean, I believe in the scholarship. I respect the scholarship, but the scholarship is factual, not emotional. It can convey the facts, but it can't convey the spirit. What Bryan is getting at is that it does provide the spirit if we look into it, if we take the tales and we perceive the tales are right and we work with that material. Now, I'm not trying to put my words in his mouth, but I think that he would probably agree with what I've said here. He's writing 2 books in particular. One of those is the one on beauty, and the other one is going to have a really killer cover because we know the gal who does it, Melena Robbins, who is a great Concentric artist. She's one of the gals that we have out at the Hoff, pretty much every weekend, and she is just a really excellent artist, and she's really blossoming. So that gives you some idea of what we were going to cover, what we were going to talk about. And so just keep that as a teaser. When he gets to some place in the near future it's got better internet service, we're going to try this again because Bryan's got a lot to say. I don't want you to have to depend upon my interpretation of what Bryan says. Look him up on Amazon or wherever, and you will find presumably something like 40 titles. Check it out. People respond to what he writes, and you certainly couldn't hurt to take a good look at it. So that's what I've got from Bryan Wilton. I can go a couple of different ways with the rest of this program. There's one topic I want to cover in a minute that it's been festering on my mind in these last few weeks. The last few weeks, and I'm looking now at the world external to Concentric. The world out there has been in turmoil, and some very ominous things are shaping up. I don't want to get too political because this is supposed to be a spiritual program. It's not that I don't have political opinions. I kind of do. If anybody, yeah, Dave's chuckling in the background. Yeah, a little bit. So, I'm just trying to keep out of the slam, man. But also, I know we've got a number of people who were queued up to follow all of this. If you've got questions you want to ask about anything I'm saying, or if you've got other questions, even if they're kind of off topic, I'll be glad to address some of those. So this is, well, it's not exactly open mic because you don't have a mic, but it's open ideas. And so, I'll have Dave there. He'll be kind of scanning through things, and if he sees that somebody's got a question, then he'll pop that on me, and we'll see if we can work that into what we're doing. So this is kind of free form, fast flowing. I hope it'll go really well, and I'll do my very best to keep this as interesting and informative as I possibly can. So, with that said, what I'm about to say now is sort of the bare bones of a talk that I'll be giving to a group of men in the near future. But really, it doesn't just apply to men. I think men have a particular aspect on it, but I think that it's absolutely important to the women who follow our way as well. And this kind of has to reflect back on those exterior things that are going on out there. I'm going to stall by having some green tea. Things on the political scale look really ugly right now. And I don't think any of us know where this is going to go. And I've spent a lot of time thinking about that for a number of days. I think, in a way, we're heading into a new conversion era. Back to the dark ages, guys. We are going into a sort of a new dark age. I don't mean technologically. We're still going to have all our gadgets. We're going to have all our toys. I mean, the social media isn't going to miss a beat, unfortunately. But in the spiritual sense, we are facing a lot of pressure from without. You don't have to be a real white nationalist, and you certainly, sure as heck, do not have to be a white supremacist to get doxxed, to get suppressed, to get lumped in with the very worst in any of those categories. It's like there's not any distinction between a folkish perspective and one that is much more radical. The world outside of us doesn't see those differences. You and I do. We understand that this really isn't about hating other people. I mean, duh. I mean, stuff on that for years and years and years. I have literally put my ass on the line for people of all races and all religions. And I'll do it again because I know that life is about concentric circles. Here's the circle that is closest to me. You know, my immediate kin, my family, those people who are really dialed in on the same page as I'm dialed in. And then there's the people out here. They're a little farther out in terms of being not quite part of the in group, but they're still tight and they're still folk. And out here we have another layer, and out here another layer. And ultimately we have all of our folk as one big concentric circle. And beyond that concentric circle, there are still other people who are not bad people. I get that. You get that. The world out there doesn't get that. With them, it's all extremism. And you and I know that that's nonsense. But what we have to do is go into this age of deplatforming, this age of doxing, this age of suppression, knowing that we've been through this before. We went through this when the missionaries came to the north. We went through this when we couldn't practice our faith in the open. We went through this when our leaders were being harassed, and thank goodness they're not burning any of us yet, but they sure as heck might put some people in prison who don't need to go to prison. I could see that. I'm just calling it like I see it. Hopefully I'm wrong. But take strength from the experience of our ancestors. Take focus from our ancestors. Take perseverance. Take courage. Take, in fact, optimism from our ancestors. We've been suppressed before. We've been lied about before. We've been misbranded before. We've been persecuted before. And doing it again is not going to be that big a deal. We must respond with courage, with heart. We must respond with intelligence. And we have to link those things together and work them into something that will get us through the hard times and give us victory. And by victory, I mean simply the freedom to put our views out there, the freedom, true freedom of speech like we're supposed to have in this country. We're not really getting that right now. The way that we respond to this will determine in many ways the outcome. I'm looking at some of the traits that I jotted down just a few minutes ago, down when we were trying to get Bryan up and get his internet working and all of that. I sat down with this piece of lined paper and I started jotting words. What do we have to have with us in here? We have to have common sense. Common sense. Part of common sense is understanding what the other person is thinking. Part of common sense is understanding that your words are going to be understood or misunderstood by people. And so use common sense in what you're saying. Don't go all freaky radical on people. I don't think that most of the people listening to this are inclined to do that anyway, thank goodness. But for all of you out there who, and I'm not disparaging you, but the truth is, all of you who consider yourself edgelords and so forth, That's not always a good thing. Consider your audience. You've got to consider the audience you're trying to reach. Most of the American people will not respond well to that. Don't let your desire to be edgy, which one might say is a little bit of egotism, get the better of you. Use common sense. Optimism. Like I said a few minutes ago, we've been through this before. There's a saying that I stole from the Theodish folks out there. Garmin Lord, I believe it was, said, and I don't know if he was quoting an Anglo-Saxon text or not. He said, "The warrior is cheerful in adversity." The warrior is cheerful in adversity. We must keep that attitude. It's the way it is in a warrior situation. If you're in a squad or a platoon and everybody's down, people are all pissed off, things are not working well, things can get really ugly really quick. It's the same with us. Be cheerful in adversity. Man up to it, or woman up to it. Close enough. Take a hold of it. Grab that situation. Grab your own emotions. And especially when you're talking with others, transmit optimism. Don't be a downer. Keep people functioning by keeping them optimistic as the situation permits. Do not despair. Basically, we're talking courage and perseverance, two of the 9 noble virtues, as I recall. We could probably go through the whole list and find out how they apply to this age we're going into. Now, maybe I'm full of it, maybe all this is going to blow over in 2 weeks, or maybe it's going to blow over in 2 months, or maybe it'll blow over after the election, or maybe it'll blow over 20 years from now, which is a lot of blow. But that really didn't come out the way I meant it. Anyway, we are entering a difficult time. And I don't know how it's going to shake out in terms of politics, legislation, censorship, investigations, red flags in regards to owning a firearm. Oh, that could get ugly pretty quick, couldn't it? Oh, this person belongs to a hate group, so this person can't own a weapon. You know where that would go real quick, and it wouldn't be nice. It would be ugly. So let's hope that doesn't go that direction. But we must be optimistic. We must stay true to each other. We've got to be tight with each other. Don't let the little bullshit get in the way. Never, ever, ever let little superficial stuff separate you from kin. We've got to make a metaphorical shield wall. I'm to the point where I hate that phrase because it's been so worked to death. I don't think I'll ever watch another Viking movie. Just kidding. Just kind of kidding. Almost kidding. That's the message I wanted to get to folks today. And if you have any questions about that or any comments on that or anything, let me know. Well, we can address that. So I intend to get through this combat effective, and no, for the censors listening, that is metaphorical speech. I will keep functioning. I will keep functioning openly. I will not curb my opinions, except to explain them in words that are true and not letting people's imagination run wild with them. So I'm in this for the long haul. You need to be in it for the long haul. Don't go, crawling in the bunker at this point. Stay in the positions where you can be effective, where you can do something that will help your folk, something that will help get through this. Take care of each other. Your buddy gets doxxed, be right there with them. Stand tough. think tough. Oppose this, tough. Remember, we've been here before. We've got this. What do you think, Dave?
You got me all fired up just now. That's pretty much what I get at. In fact, I actually did a video today on my channel when I do a video for my car, driving back and forth to work or errands or whatever, just to give people some extra content. I do a little live stream with whatever's going on in my mind. And today I talked about the coming wolf age. I know there's some debate around whether or not we are leaving the wolf age or whether we're going into the wolf age or what have you. I am on the side of I believe that we are about to leave the wolf age. However, that stuff doesn't matter. But what really matters is Mr. McNallen's right. We are heading towards a new dark age, and this dark age is very much because of our integration with technology. There's so many things that are coming that are going to be like, we're talking 20, 30 years from now, our lives will be unrecognizable from what they are today. It's going to be a complete evolution of how we operate and how we live in our lifestyles, and even down to our genetics. We're getting into gene editing and and we could get into all of that stuff. But the bottom line is Mr. McNallen's completely right. Here's the deal. Fear is a subjective feeling. Fear is created by you yourself. You project and you manifest fear in yourself. That our enemy's power over us is a complete illusion. Just like the dollar bill, for example. Everybody knows that the value of the dollar bill is completely subjective, as value is subjective as a whole with everything. It transcends and goes to everything. If everybody, or even say like 1/8 of the United States population said the United States dollar, the American note, no longer has any value to me, I now use gold pieces, that would crash and destroy the dollar because its value is completely illusionary. It exists only in our own minds. Keep that in mind moving forward. The power that our enemies have over us, the people that are coming after us, their power over us is really just illusionary. We are the people that have built aqueducts. We are the people that have climbed the highest mountains, sailed the furthest seas, and sailed into space. We've survived ice ages. We've survived plagues. We've survived persecutions. We've survived genocides. Everything, every catastrophe, cataclysm that you can think of in your mind throughout history, our folk have not only survived, but have thrived. This is nothing compared to some of that stuff. Think about the bubonic plague. Think about the last ice age. Think about all of these things. Think about all of the wars that have happened in recent times, in contemporary times, going back to ancient wars. We survived in, go look at the history of the Middle Ages. It wasn't like it is now. Back in the Middle Ages and even back further, the Bronze Age, the Iron Age, man, at any time your village could be raided and you had to stand up and you had to fight and you could you would possibly die. A lot of people died. Death was part of life. Fear was part of life. Survival was part of life. We live in these nice little air-conditioned rooms. We have our internet. We have our modern medicine. We have all of this stuff. Despite this, we are fighting a great enemy. We are fighting a great scourge. We are coming up into an age of darkness and confusion. Actually, we're already in an age of darkness and confusion. However, do not let that get you down. Like Mr. McNallen said, remain cheerful. What is the whole story about Ragnar Lothbrok when before King Aella threw him in the pit of snakes and Ragnar laughed at him? Yeah, he laughed at him and Aella said, "Why are you laughing?" He said, "Well, if I laugh at you, that means you've never defeated me." And that's absolutely true. What enrages people more than anything? When they are a joke. Because whether or not you respect them or you fear them, that gives them a position of power that makes them feel like they have power, that ensures them that they have power over you. If you laugh, you have just robbed them of all of their power. Stay cheerful, even in dark times. And keep in mind that our ancestors survived and fought and thrived in conditions that were far worse than what we have now.
The actual line from Ragnar's saga is "Laughing shall I die," and I think that's something we should all aspire to. For one thing, it emphasizes your own focus, your own calmness. They can kill you, But if they can't control you, if they can't make you fear, then you win.
Yeah, absolutely. They're saying in the chat, my volume's a little low. Let me fix that real quick. Check 1, check 2, check 1, check 2. That should be a little better. So, yeah, it's absolutely right. It's absolutely right that, all of this is illusionary and we must stay cheerful. But also, Mr. McNally put on he mentioned a point there that's going to be a little bit edgy in itself, that people have to kind of chill out on being edgy moving forward now. We've had a lot of fun being edgy on the internet. We had a lot of fun, especially I remember early 2000s when the internet was a Wild West and there was no holds barred and everything went, and it was the environment. But moving forward, as you mentioned with the red flag laws, and I said this was coming years ago. This is coming. We're gonna get to a point where it's like we have thought police, like in 1984, when people are committing thought crimes. We already do. It's called a hate crime. A hate crime is a thought crime. And very much they're going to keep expanding the definition of what hate crime is. They're going to keep expanding the definition of hate, and they're going to keep expanding the punishments for those that violate these false laws that they fabricate. So it's going to keep getting worse. So we have to have some more discipline with the stuff that we're saying. Man, I'm guilty of it too. Everybody that knows me, I could be a troll. I can get out there and I can say some edgy stuff, and I do it for laughs or I do it to get a rise out of people. But even me myself, I'm telling myself, hey man, it's time to take it back a notch, because guess what? You have a family. You have people that depend on you. You have a lot of stuff that you take care of. You have a lot of people that lean on you and they look to you for stuff. You're not just a joker anymore. And I have to fulfill that role that's been gifted to me. And that's one of the things that I'm trying to do. I'm trying to discipline my speech and discipline what I put out there on the public space. Because let me tell you, and I know this might get in, because I know Mr. McNallen's real big on the deep state and domestic surveillance and stuff. But everything you say is recorded and kept forever. And with you better believe it's they're hoping to use it against you in court someday. So make sure you're using discipline with what you say on the internet. And you better believe that using your sock account or your alt accounts, it doesn't matter at all. If they want to find you, they can find you.
Well, I think it's important to make it as difficult for them as possible. But ultimately, it just depends on how much effort they want to put into it. This is not conspiracy theory. It is fact that
Sure.
everything goes to NSA, all of it. And they don't have it at their fingertips, but if you become a person of interest, oh, okay, yeah, bam, there you are. But also I think it's important to understand what good propaganda is. Good propaganda, reaching people, red pilling people, whatever you want to call it, you've got to consider different things. You've got to consider your audience. Who's your audience? Are your various audiences, and you're going to have a different approach for those audiences. What are their needs? What are their perceptions? Where's their head at? An old saying on the left is, to take the revolution to the masses, you've got to go to where the masses are at. That means psychologically as well as physically. Think about, what is it you want the person to know? What is it you want them to understand? How can you present that in a way that they will not just automatically reject it? Yeah, we are in a time when our ability to wake people up, our ability to pull people who have not already considered us toward us, how to reach people who now are entirely at a different place in their heads. What will bring them in? What will interest them? What will draw them toward us? How can we demonstrate that the world that we envision is better than the one that they envision? And you don't do that by insulting them, and you don't do that by threatening them. You do that by simply making that identification with what they need and the superiority of our ideas. And that's basic propaganda. It's important stuff. We need to be professional propagandists, not just shit talkers, So,
Yeah, absolutely.
Not that I don't occasionally talk a little. But,
oh yeah. Well, you got to do it a little bit. You got to do it at least a little bit.
Well, just to remember how, in case I ever want to do it again. Right?
Just to keep up with the Joneses.
Yeah, something like that. We got any questions out there? Anybody asking any questions?
No, but folks are enjoying the stream. Yeah, folks, if you have any sort of question at all, make sure to drop it in the chat here for Mr. McNallen or myself, and we will be happy to answer it. Hey, my wife's in the chat. She wants I promised her a wrench, so.
Oh, okay. Very good.
There
Very
we go.
good.
Now she gets a wrench. Okay. So anyway, speaking of propaganda, you mentioned something before the stream that was really interesting, and it's something that I've also been interested in, and that is the Votan network. Mr. McNallen, can you tell us what the Votan network is?
Yes, I certainly can. Why? What a coincidence. I just happen to have an interest in that. Votan network is, actually, I've got a blurb here, and it's the same thing I say every time, so I might as well just get it off the paper, so I don't stumble. The Votan network is a religious, spiritual, cultural, metapolitical, and political network. Notice, network, not an organization. It's a network. It's a decentralized network with hubs and links for invoking the might and wisdom of Votan for the awakening of our people. You can find the Votan Network update group on Facebook for those of you that haven't been kicked terminally off of there yet. You can also find it on Gab and just about any place that you're going to find me. And if you can't find it, email me at wolfagemedia@gmail.com, and I will link you up with that. One of the best things that we do with Votan Network is something called Votan on the Peaks. And for any of you enthusiasts for Julius Evola, we kind of borrowed his Meditations on the Peaks as our inspiration for this. And the idea is that people do something physical. Anybody can sit in front of the keyboard. Anybody can talk trash with their neighbors or their friends or whatever. And in this connected world, we're all the time communicating with people. But maybe we don't actually get out in I won't say the streets. How about the mountains? How about getting out in the mountains and doing things? How about you carrying your activism to the physical level, not by, engaging in terrorist actions, but by engaging in spiritually informed physical endeavors, climbing a mountain. Doesn't have to be Annapurna. Doesn't have to be even Shasta. Use what you've got locally. Of course, I know in Florida that means you're limited to about 300 feet. But hey, do what you can. The idea is that a group of people who are in harmony with this idea will climb up a peak in their area, get up there on the top, share the horn, pour a libation to Odin, or to Votan, actually, because we're using that name of him because that whole idea of the Votan archetype and so forth. That's kind of the connection there. Not that I think of Votan as just an archetype, so don't make that mistake on it. And we go up and we do this physical endeavor. We sacrifice. What do we sacrifice? We sacrifice our time. We sacrifice our sweat. We sacrifice our efforts climbing up a blasted mountain somewhere. Then we get to the top and we share the mead. We offer a horn to Votan as a symbol of that true sacrifice that we make for him. And it's all about stirring the folk soul. It's all about, call it the collective unconscious. It's all about reaching down past that individual existence, which we all very truly have, and reaching down to the soul of our people, invoking Votan's might, but also his wisdom into us so that we may awaken our folk. Because the way we're going, we're headed for tough times. We must find that spiritual essence, and we must transform that spiritual essence into action in the real world, which climbing a mountain is. So that is what Votan on the Peaks is about. And I don't think I mentioned it, but we then share all of that with Votan Network because it encourages others, it inspires others to do so. I've got some great things that came through today. One of our guys in Southern California, he's done quite a few of these. and he published his pictures, and they're great. It's a chance to get together and build bonds with men and women of like mind, and to get exercise in the outdoors, reconnect with nature, and perform a vitally spiritual act with the intention of stirring our folk into wakefulness, so that we may, in fact, be one with our gods and with our folk and attain our destiny, right? That's what this is all about. And so Votan Network is a means of enabling that. It is not highly organized. I don't want it highly organized. It needs to be a network organization, flat. We're not talking a vertical organization with departments and sub-departments and a board of directors. And no. It doesn't go vertical. It goes flat, just like a computer network. This is a network, not a vertical organization, which, by the way, for those of you who follow such things, is how insurgencies are organized these days. And an insurgency can just be a spiritual insurgency. It can be a political insurgency where no one ever has to lift up, arms in order to be a part of a network that is accomplishing things on this scale. There. How's that for an answer?
That was pretty succinct. So,
yes, brothers and sisters. Woo! I can be as much of a preacher as Bryan Wilton.
But I really love, first of all, Ms. McNow, did you draw any inspiration when you came up with the idea of the network from The Leaderless Resistance by Colonel Amos?
Not actually. I'd be interested in knowing more about that. I mean, leaderless resistance has been kind of a thing, at least in the background, for decades. But I am not familiar with that particular person or that particular document.
Yeah, Colonel Amos was an army guy. He was, I guess, he was military intelligence. He's from Baltimore, and his job throughout the years, from all the way from the post World War II or something. I'm not sure exactly what his career was, but his job throughout the years, which is many decades, was to figure out the psychology and the tactics behind mostly the communist insurgencies, communist revolutions and stuff like that, from looking at the Bolsheviks and the Mensheviks all the way up to Antifa and stuff like that. And he wanted to devise kind of come up with what their strategy really is and why it's so effective. And he, at the end of his career, he wrote a very short document explaining the tactics used by these insurgencies, and even it goes back to like the founding fathers used this same tactic of the leaderless resistance, which is pretty much word for word what you're describing with the Votan network, which is like you said, there's a vertical organization, or what Amos calls a pyramid organization, which is easily infiltrated and which is pretty spooky. He writes this, I believe he wrote it in the 80s, but he said with today's technology, and with today's technology, it's nearly impossible to have a successful insurgent pyramid organization, and in the future it will be even more impossible, because he can't even fathom what the technology will be like then, which is, I guess, now, but he pretty much just describes have high trust, localized cells of people, and then the only thing that ties them together is an ideal and the dissemination of information. So it's pretty much the same exact thing as Votan Network. It's pretty interesting that you came to that conclusion.
Well, actually, I've studied networks for quite a long while. Everybody knows that I've had strong military interest all my life. And one of the books that really rocked my world in that regard was one called Brave New War by John Robb. And he talks about the difference between a vertical organization and a horizontal one. Even in some of the communist insurgencies, like Mao Zedong, Che Guevara, all of those, still in those, like in the Vietnamese situation, there was still a vertical component. They used unconventional tactics and decentralized tactics, but there was still a lot of the standard organization, because people's minds were just thinking that way. But along with computers and computer networks, people started thinking differently about organization, and they thought, well, hell with this vertical stuff. Let's do it flat. You can network them in such a way that you have workarounds if you get a hole in the network, and so forth. And it works just fine for nonviolent purposes as well as anything else. Really good book. I wish I had it at my fingertips, but I don't. Something like Networks and Net War, or Net War and Networks. I believe the Rand put it out. Rand Corporation, big think tank. That was one other source. That's the way that people are thinking. The basic idea is that you don't have to be in touch with a formalized network if you know the mission and what there is to accomplish. You take the information you're given and use your own initiative. It's virtually impossible to infiltrate something like that. And take caution not to be doxxed or anything. I have had people who were unfortunately doxxed partly by like the Votan mit uns Wolfsangle T-shirt, or because we do have from time to time people who come in and try to infiltrate. What we need to do is to keep that infiltration out, because we are essentially a decentralized function. That's what we like, and that's how we do it. So on it goes. You can do that with an idea other than blowing stuff up. You can do that with the idea of blowing people's minds. It's not mind warfare; it's minds warfare at this point, and that's where we're at.
Very cool. Yeah. And I think this would be a good time to lead into you're talking about networking, maybe some of the more spiritual aspects of a network, and of we could say people are familiar with the term memetics. But before we hop into that, what do you say we answer a couple questions? We got some questions in the chat here.
Sure, fire them up.
Anam Kara asks, any Texas meetups coming up?
Ooh, a lot of stuff happening in Texas. Say again who this was?
Anam Kara. I don't know how to say their name. Anam Kara. I'm not sure.
Okay. I know the AFA has people in Texas. They should contact my wife, Sheila, who is the folk builder for South Central section, which includes Texas. I obviously have a strong connection with Texas. Let's see. What other do I need to say about Texas? Oh, here's what I need to say about Texas. And I think I mentioned this to you earlier, Dave, but I don't know that our folks out there heard it. I've just created a video for Red Ice. In fact, I'm in the process of trying to upload it now. It might take a little while for it to actually appear. But the title of it is Conan, Texas, and Me. And it's my story as a young boy in Texas, wonderfully enriched and involved with the writings of Robert E. Howard, who wrote the Conan stories and so forth, and sort of founded what we call the sword and sorcery genre, and the role of Texas, because I feel that Texas is very important. Politically, it is very important spiritually. I am a Texan. I love Texas. I get back to Texas every time I get a chance. And there are things happening in Texas. Please contact me or my wife. You can get both of us at wolfagemedia@gmail.com, and we'll dial you in on that. Definitely want to talk to Texans. Texas is a unique place. And if Texans ever remember their heritage, and I'm afraid the city dwellers, a lot of them have lost it, but if they recover the spirit of the Alamo or Goliad, how many people out there have even heard of Goliad, where Fannon's men were massacred? Or, of course, our victory at San Jacinto, which made Texas an independent nation for 9 years. And maybe that was kind of a good idea. And I'm going on and on. I'll back out and shut up now. Next question.
Next question. Joel Bateman asks, how long is the wolf age?
I think it's a term that we can't tie down. I mean, it refers, of course, to the sort of the, I hate to make the comparison, but it's from what people know. It's sort of the also true version of, the end of the world quotes. the apocalypse, all that sort of thing. It's for us, it's the end of the cycle, a cycle of time, because we do see time as cyclical, and I can't really define that specifically. It's largely it's something we sometimes use loosely. I do feel that we are in an apocalyptic time, that we are in a time of certainly intellectual and social disorder and uproar. And I think history shows that will probably manifest in the physical realm as realm as well. So I can't tell you how long a wolf age is. An axe age, a wolf age, ere the world ends, is the line out of the Eddas. So what's an axe age? What's a sword age? What's a wolf age? It's kind of a general term we use for a time of Ragnarok, either literal or metaphorical. So it's a loose term, frankly.
Yeah, Wolf Age. It's really fascinating because I would say that it's sort of our version of Kali Yuga. It's how we describe Kali Yuga. And however, the Dharmic folks, they have it mapped out down to numbers. They have it all numbered out to the amount of years and everything like that. We don't know what the exact number is, but maybe someday we'll figure it out. And I think that would be pretty cool if we did.
Well, yeah. With all respect to the Dharma folks, actually, I'm quite interested in the Vedic / Dharma / whatever kind of approach to all of this, because there are some very strong comparisons. Of course, it's that whole Indo-European, Indo-Aryan worldview that has resonances all the way across the continents and through the thousands of years. So yeah, they get some good stuff.
Okay, so my homegirl, old Mrs. Ramblewood, says, I guess my question about the Wolf Age time is if it stretches all the way back to the beginning of civilization, or is it like the beginning of the end of civilization?
I think if I had to choose between those two, I would say the latter. I think it's probably a pretty typical pattern for civilizations to rise and kind of get it together, and then there's this upward curve, and then things start faltering, and then things start falling apart, or as Yeats says in his poem about the second coming, the center fails to hold, and things begin dissolving and coming apart and decaying. And I think it could be argued that Western civilization is definitely at that point. Certainly in terms of the history of our section of the human race, we are not doing that well at this point. We have lost a lot of our vigor. We have lost a lot of our focus. We are, I think, in many ways distracted by degeneracies, and we're giving into those. We're absorbed by those, and it is up to the rest of us to have that spiritual focus and the spiritual drive to try and make a difference on this, and to fight this battle instead of just succumbing to degeneracy and dissolution and decay and so forth.
All right, another question we have. It's a question from a question from an Ibero-Celtic pagan. Why don't you call the Northern European Allfather Votan? Isn't it his Anglo-Saxon name instead of Votan or Odin?
All of those are names for him. The one you could call by his, the Proto-Germanic, maybe, or is it Proto-Germanic or Proto-Indo-European root, Wodanas, which means, the inspired one, the one connected with wisdom and with ecstasy and so forth. It basically, it's to me, it's the same. I use the term Votan in the Votan network because I'm deliberately appealing to a sort of continental Germanic kind of inspiration, which was kind of made famous by Carl Jung in his essay titled simply Votan. And he spoke of Votan not as a real god, but as an archetype in the collective unconscious of the Germanic people. And he showed how that is demonstrated at other times in history. And I took that basic idea and ran with it. Now, to me, whether you call him Odin or Votan or Woden, he's still the same holy power, and he still responds to us. And I consider him much more than just an archetype in the sense that Jung did. To me, whether you call him Votan or Woden or Voden or Odin or Wodanaz, he's real and is capable of moving and acting in our lives.
Very cool. I mean, this isn't a question here, but I have to respond to this. CG, I think he's referring to Robert E. Howard. He says, best fantasy writer after Tolkien. I mean, I'll accept that. You're not going to get banned this time, but if there was any name other than Tolkien, you would be banned. I'm sorry.
Yeah. I had the honor of actually pouring a libation on Robert E. Howard's grave. Now, Dave, I think you and I have talked about this, but I don't know that I've said this in public or on the air here. So I hope I'm not just telling people, it's another one of Steve's stories. Yeah, I got a lot of them. Life is about the stories, man. Life is about the stories. I went down to Brownwood, Texas, which actually was not that far from where I was born. And I found the Howard family grave where, in fact, Robert E. Howard is buried. And I had a horn, but tragically, I had no mead. However, this is Texas. And I had not a bottle, I guess it was a can of Budweiser. So I poured Robert E. Howard a horn of Budweiser. And I don't do that lightly or for effect or because that's ha 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 funny, because it's not really. I mean, Robert E. Howard was a small town boy. He would have been quite happy with a Budweiser. Hell, I'd be quite happy with a Budweiser. So it was not an ironic or a superficial kind of act. Also, anybody who's within driving distance, go down to Cross Plains, Texas. I was born about 50 miles from there, but Cross Plains is where Robert E. Howard wrote. That's where he lived when he was doing his writing. His former house is now a museum, which you can go through. I have had the honor of putting on gloves and going to the vaults downtown, such as there is a downtown in Cross Plains. And I have seen and, touched, through plastic, the original manuscripts of some of these tales. It's powerful. It's powerful. I strongly recommend Robert E. Howard, not just as a writer of sword and sorcery, but as a man who got it, who instinctively understood so many things, and who completely disregarded and dismissed the kind of degeneracy and weakness that we find all around us in modern society.
Yeah.
I'm on my soapbox again, aren't I? Okay.
No, it's all right. We're talking about Conan. I'll pull out 2 soapboxes for that. Another thing about Robert E. Howard, him and H.P. Lovecraft were actually good friends, and they exchanged a lot of letters and stuff. And in one case, they actually traded worlds. H.P. Lovecraft wrote like a Conan kind of short story, and then Robert E. Howard wrote, I believe it was called Cthulhu Mythos and Tales of Horror or something like that. And they were both really awesome. They both did a really good job. And but you could tell in their writing that both of them kind of were inspired by each other. And especially in the Robert E. Howard stuff, as his books go on, I'm listening to him at work right now on an audiobook, and I'm going through like them in chronological order. And as it goes on, you're starting to hear more like Lovecraftian, style of describing horrible, evil things that are like, of despicable nature, writhing masses of unfathomable form, and like from the unspeakable depths and all this stuff. I love it. I get crazy about it.
Oh, me too, man. Me too. Oh, heck yeah. Imagine me at the age that I ran across this. I was like 14, 15, 16, around in there. And, just this young guy in rural Texas, testosterone drenched, didn't know what to do with it. And here is this this tale, of epic courage and strength and honorable behavior and all of that. I mean, it knocks me off my feet, man.
Awesome.
Totally did.
Love it. So,
Yeah.
another question from Miss Ramblewood. She asks, "What is the Asatru view of mysticism? Are there any Germanic heathen mystics?"
Well, I would be interested in the definition of mystics in that regard. Certainly, there is, shall we say, an esoteric or a mystical side to Asatru. It most popularly is known in the runes and the way that the runes are used. Runes, of course, are much more than a writing system. They are not even principally a writing system. They are principally a magical alphabet, for lack of a better term. And then there's Savor, which is a different kind of magic that can be practiced. And then, I've done a lot of writing, actually comparing the story of Odin's meat theft with the Kundalini techniques of Kundalini yoga, and I'm not doing that in a way of trying to blend them at all. Don't get me wrong; it's not about blending them. I completely am against that. What we must find, the unique characteristics in each one, and I am completely and absolutely Germanic in my approach. But there are comparisons there that probably go back to ancient Indo-Aryan times, and it's worthwhile to explore that, because speaking of mystical things, I think we're talking about ultimately transformations in consciousness and in personal power, spiritual power, and that is exactly the way of Odin. I mean, Odin is all about mysticism in that sense. It doesn't read like your street corner mysticism that you'll find down at the occult bookstore very often, but it's genuine, it's organic to the system, and it is entirely fascinating. I mean, Odin doesn't want us to obey him and follow him as much as he wants us to become like him, to increase our own wisdom, to increase our consciousness, and to be able to use that expanded consciousness in ways that will attain the goals we want. I mean, we must have more than just the mundane, worldly kinds of talents and skills to save our people, to lead our people where they need to be, to take the European descended peoples who at this point in history are teetering on extermination. And that's the truth if you look at the details. To avoid that extermination, to guarantee a future for our folk forever, and then to cooperate or at least coexist with others around the world. We have our destiny. Odin leads us to that destiny, and he leads us by mystical things, I think, more necessarily than by political means. Doesn't mean the politics is bad or should be avoided. I'm a very political person. I just don't air it too much on this particular forum. But ultimately, it is a spiritual battle. Ultimately, it deals with consciousness, with heart, with mind, more than with fist.
Very good.
I hope that was an answer.
Yeah, and I also wanted to add, CG mentioned in the chat, he says Galdering. I think he means Galder magic is a form of mysticism. Now, in the Asatru path, essentially there are two types of magic. Now, some paths have different views of different types of magic, and the what's the word I can use? Whether or not some of them are ethical. For example, Sather magic in some groups and some circles is considered. In fact, it's based off of the some of the stories and stuff. Odin, when he gets back to Asgard after being banished for using Sather magic, bans it. So there are a lot of people, a lot of kindreds that say no, say their magic. That's considered in a lot of texts and a lot of history. It was considered ergi, which is a word for like subhuman or unmanly back in the Iron Age in the old times. But Galder magic is probably the most widely accessed, and it's probably the most easily performed. And I think that every single also true person should be able to practice Galder magic. And what Galder magic really is, magic. I hate, honestly, in today's world, I don't like using the word magic, but I can use it with you guys because you guys know what I'm talking about. But if I go talking about magic to some normies out there, they're gonna think I'm talking about Harry Potter and Dungeons and Dragons. Nothing against D&D. I play D&D. So, but anyway, I digress. So, Galder magic would be like, as Mr. McNown was talking about, your study of runes, your rune work. It's going to be your rune casting. It's going to be your chants. It's going to be your meditation. It's going to be your prayers. It's going to be your studying and your contemplation, and it's going to be those things that kind of, I guess you could say, draw power from the ether, from the gods themselves, to bring into yourself, as opposed to say their magic, which is considered using your own energy and putting it outward, because a lot of times in the story, say their magic is used to deceive, is used to curse and do like stuff like that.
Well, I think any form of magic can be used to negative ends or to good ends, and I know there's some folks that'll disagree with that, but I don't disregard satyrs the way that some others do. Thorson wrote a book called Witchdom of the True, which I don't know that it's been republished, which is unfortunate, because it takes the whole Wicca or witchy kind of thing, and it gives it an actual basis. It takes it back to the fertility cult, of Freya and Freyr, and integrates that into the Odinic and the also true worldview. It's not something to be dismissed, I think. Yeah. That's kind of my take on it. And to me, I use Galder to mean those techniques that are primarily vocal.
Yeah.
And I think of the croaking of the raven, so to speak. Apparently Galder talk, could involve that kind of a technique. Just different tone of voice and so forth.
I think it literally translates to chant, doesn't it?
I don't know that it literally does. I don't know. Tell you the truth, that's a good question. I know it's often used to basically mean a chant or a vocal technique.
Yeah.
But I don't know the etymology of the word, to tell you the truth.
Yeah. A lot of people think of your throat singing and your chanting, or as like the Dharmic people call your mantras, kind of stuff similar to that. But
or Galdering the names of the runes, things like that.
Yeah. And and then there's also certain meters. If you want to get into doing your Galder chanting, there are certain meters and stuff that you can use, and ways to format your prayers or your chants or whatever. You got your, what is it, the Galder log, which is like the law of Galder, and then there's another one as well. I can't remember off the top of my head. I have to pull out my notes.
There's such a ton of stuff out there, really. I mean, there's plenty of room for investigation if anybody's interested in that. It's massive. It's massive. I Galder the names of the runes, or the rune, or the vocalic value of runes sometimes while thinking about particular aims or particular things I want to focus on, and the intention that I wish to get. So there's different ways of doing it. And some of them are, technical involved. I mean, if you start talking into Galder law and stuff like that, but you can just do it in, I won't say normal language, but language that intuitively you may be able to do it better in.
Yeah.
So it's wide open for exploration.
Yeah, it's really a fascinating topic to start getting into, because I started digging into like the science of sound and like stuff like that, and I really started to understand I was digging so hard trying to find prayers and like ancient languages and like all of this stuff. And then I started to realize that it's like the science of sound, and I started doing research into this stuff. And it didn't matter the language itself, but what mattered was like the number of syllables, the tone, the pitch and like that stuff is more important than so much the words that you use are for yourself to get yourself into the mindset. But what if you want to have functionality? It's the syllables and the meter and like all that stuff. At least that's what I learned.
I think all of those are good refinements. If you don't have those refinements down, simply go to vocalizing the appropriate rune. You got to know what the runes are about. You got to know their connections. I won't say their meanings, but their associations. The concepts behind those particular runes. But once you've integrated that into your consciousness, to where whenever you alter the name of that rune, it's got its unique impressions that you're working with. I think once you get that far, it becomes a matter of will, your willpower, your focus, your concentration, and the utilization of the runic energy of a particular rune.
Yeah.
So, and some people get into the rune postures and all that kind of stuff. You've got Elha's position, and then you bend over for Uruz, and you've got something else for each of the runes. And a lot of that is, I think, a 20th century phenomenon, but that doesn't necessarily make it invalid. The important thing is that you are utilizing all the cues that you have put into yourself, all the associations you've made in your conscious and subconscious. If you associate this arms upward position with Elhaz, or different positions with different runes, if you have worked with that association so that every time you go to that pose, you're using that rune, you're using that focus, you're using those associations, then you're going to get results. You're going to get results. And so there's a whole lot to that stuff.
Yeah.
And the fact that some of it maybe came around in the 20th century is that's not a problem. I mean, Odin was always searching. He didn't just stick with the tried and true. And I think as his children, we need to do likewise.
All right, we have a really big brain question here. I like this.
Are you ready? No, not one of those.
Oh yeah.
Farm you.
So it's Servius Terentius. He's already got a big brain name. I'm already confused here. But anyway, actually, I really like this question. I have a lot to say about this, but I want to hear what Mr. McNallen has to say. He says,
all right.
Is there anything like the Neoplatonic concept of the One or Brahman of Vedanta? Can that have a place in Asatru?
Well, that is a good big brain one. And, the fact that I was an altar boy and can actually speak a few words of Latin doesn't really help me deal with that one. I think of that as sort of a almost an impersonal all. And I think there are hints of things like that, in our path, but I'm not really an expert on that. And, I can't tell you a lot about it. I know a lot about a lot of things, but I can't give you a good answer to that.
Yeah. Well, as far as you're talking about the great oneness, as the Neoplatonic stuff gets into, and also Julius Evola gets into, like the great oneness, and then some of the Dharmic people have developed what's called monism, which is the idea of there's a great divinity, and that is the overarching divinity, and then the gods are manifestations, all the manifestations, different sovereign manifestations of that one overarching divinity. Now, this is what we do in Neurona Society. We dig into all this like big brain philosophy stuff, and we debate it. We dig up the lore. So what we have dug up out of the lore, pretty much what the Asatru, what the lore teaches us, and what the Asatru position on the great oneness or the Neoplatonic view of oneness isn't so much like monism. Our oneness isn't so much like a divinity in itself. The gods are divinity, and the gods are immanent. However, they are born of the universe, born of the universal principles of Orlog and Weird and all of this stuff. Our oneness isn't necessarily divine and conscious. It is more like, I guess you could say, like an operating system or on a computer. It's more mechanical. It it operates all things and stuff like that. And of that universal law of the universe is born the gods to teach us about the how the universe operates and stuff like that. So that's kind of where we get into like the deeper philosophies of divinity and stuff like that.
And that's something that makes sense to me. I don't think of it as you said. I don't think that we would conceive of the Brahman or the all with a capital A necessarily as a divinity per se. I think we're just manifestations of all that is, and I think that's it's in a way. This kind of deals with what I've been working with lately on the idea of non-locality, and I'm trying to get my head around this concept that everything is connected, and in a way, the very 1960s thing to say was, "Oh well, man, it's all one." Well, yeah, but no. Paradoxically, everything is not one and yet is. And every time is now, but not. Every place is here, but not. And I don't even know if this really has anything to do with Asatru per se. Maybe it does. I haven't really put that connection in there. But, I was looking into a lot of material dealing with, say, remote viewing. And actually with a number of physicists who've been working with the idea as well. And some of them have been doing it for some decades, but I hadn't known about it. Wheeler back in decades ago, when all this stuff on gravitational fields and stuff was talking about that. But I never really got my head around it. I kind of avoided it because there's a very individualistic part of me that does not want to be part of X or Y or Z. I don't want to become one with God. I don't want to become one with Odin. I'm distinct. I'm individual, just as he is distinct and individual. And so I'm not into the, give up your individuality, blend, merge, become one. Nah, that's bullshit. That's all right-hand path stuff. in Thorson's interpretation and definition of that. But I think it's important for us to think about these things because certainly it affects things like our approach to influencing the cosmos. Remote viewing is based on the idea of non-locality. But the important thing to me is that there's nothing in this concept and I would not accept anything in this concept that destroys our uniqueness or our individuality. And same for the gods. I'm not interested particularly in anything that says, oh, the gods are less than the gods. The gods are still the gods, just as we're still people.
Yeah.
And we are not the all. I don't want to be the all. I don't want to be one with the all. I want to be individual, whether or not there's a all out there. Yeah. I guess that's all I have to say on that.
Now, you mentioned right-hand path versus left-hand path and stuff like that. I think that's what's unique about our faith is, especially when you get deep into the philosophies, is it's kind of I don't want to say it's a blend of the two, but it's kind of like a middle ground. We recognize we are part of a collective, a spiritual collective and a conscious collective, but we are also individuated, not necessarily individualist, but individuated. We are consciously sovereign as well. So you can have both at the same time. You don't have to have one or the other. That's somebody mentioned about duality. I reject the idea of oneness, and I reject the idea of duality. I accept the idea of multiplicity because nature is multiplicity. The universe is multiplicity.
Okay, I think that makes sense to me. I guess what I emphasize, I just keeping the definition as simple as possible, as per Thorson. Left-hand path is all those paths, philosophies, religions, philosophies that say we are to become more than we are, which to me is an incredibly Odinic thing. A right-hand path is the path that teaches absorption, surrender to, becoming part of, intimately, part of the mass, the whole, the collective, rather than having individuality. So like, Islam is, right-hand path right away because it means submission. And that's not our bag. Christianity, as I understand it, similarly would be right-hand path. Left-hand path is many of your pagan paths, I think. And maybe one might hypothesize that folk religions tend to be left-hand path. What it is not is what many people and occultists have written as left-hand path. We're evil. We're going to go out and, we're going to torture somebody and shit like that. That's it. Nah, it's not about that. It's about maintaining your individuality. Ich bin der Mann. Become Odinic. Odin doesn't blend. Odin doesn't merge with. Odin doesn't become one with something else. He's what he is. We're reflections of that, but we're still unique. We're still individuals. Anyway, kind of my take on it. Dave, I'm thinking maybe we ought to wrap it up. Yeah. We're looking at 6:33 or so. We could go on all night, but
yes, sir. Is it cool if I add on a little bit to the left-hand path thing real quick? Because that's something that I talk about a lot.
Please, yes, fire it up.
Now, as far as the left-hand path, I've read a lot. Actually, I read Thorson's about left-hand path years ago, and I used to be left-hand path. And I sort of reject left-hand path as well, because it has the connotation of being evil and spooky and stuff like that, but because it's very much it becomes a worship of self. It becomes that there are no real gods. You are God. That's something that our ancestors believed in gods. They, many times feared the gods. They accepted that the gods had existence, as we've been talking about tonight. We mentioned quite a few times. I'm like you. I'm not interested in anything that boils the gods down to anything but gods. I'm not interested in that at all. I don't want to hear that they were trees or they were this or they were like living people. And I think some of the theories are cool and some of the stories are cool and stuff like that. But at the end of the day, from my experiences and my knowledge and my spiritual experiences, I know for a fact that the gods are real. They are real deities. So it's like I can't accept this idea that I am somehow a god when I'm just a guy. I'm just a man.
Right. Gotcha. I pretty much agree with that. I do think that it is possible for humans to attain a very high level of evolution and to become demigods, so to speak. I think it is possible for people to go from being humans in the ordinary sense to being humans with very special capabilities, basically independent of the limitations of space and time and mortality and causality. Well, not causality. Causality is always there. In essence, a lot like in the East, you have the idea of, I want to say Babaji, or I won't say Yogananda because Yogananda freaking died and that doesn't count. But the tales of Babaji, which I'm not sure I believe any of that, but in theory, as a theory, I think that the Odinic path is something like that. And I think that humans can become enlightened beings of a higher order, but still humans. You don't lose your individuality. You don't say, well, I'm going to wake up and be somebody else next week. No, you're still you with your unique characteristics. But I think it's possible to attain higher states of consciousness and higher states of physical being. But that's a hypothesis.
Yeah, I like it. I like it. What a wonderful discussion that is.
Yeah, what fun. I've enjoyed this. I'm really glad that folks felt free to ask their questions. I want to encourage that, and I hope that people have enough questions in the future so that with every podcast we can take a few minutes and just address people's questions, because I like it. It's a casual chat, and casual chat's what I really do better rather than just wah.
Yeah.
I don't know. Anyway, hey, thanks to all the people that are listening out there, and thanks especially for everybody who's participating. That's really a great thing. Do you have any final comments you wanna put out there, Dave, before I do my wrap up?
No, just in conclusion, I would like to say, keep everything in mind, man. Everything that we talked about tonight was pretty important. Everything from making sure that we survive the what a big brain conversation, good stuff. But
Good stuff. Great.
surviving the wolf age by having common sense, by having discipline, by having honor, and then going into what we were talking about later on with individuation, but also understanding that you are part of a folk, that you are part of a spiritual collective, that you can have both. You don't need to be black and white. We're not duality people. We're not like monotheists out here doing that. You can have both, and you can ascend to a higher level and all of this stuff. And one of the biggest aspects of trying to survive the wolf age, what does it say in I know we don't like to do the what's it called when you blend the stuff. We don't like doing that stuff. But there is a very profound quote, and I'm gonna completely butcher it, but I'm gonna say it anyways because I think it's really great. Talking about in I believe it was the Rig Veda. I can't remember which one it was, in one of the Hindu texts about the Kali Yuga, and it said when you're completely surrounded by the darkness of Kali Yuga, if you repeat the prayer of Krishna, you will ascend to the kingdom of God. And what that means is that when you are all surrounded by darkness, if you stay true to yourself and you stay true and you practice your Galdar and you have a relationship with the gods and with your folk and with your family, and you live a good life and a virtuous life, and you try to ascend to the highest level, your primordial form, you will ascend to that higher level, and we will survive the wolf age.
Works for me. Well said. So that's all for tonight, folks. Keep your powder dry, your cupboard full, your spouse happy, your children close, and your data out of the hands of the deep state. And love life in Midgard, for it is a wondrous gift. Thanks for being here. Good night.